Lisa Tessier, as Dr. Popescu said, and I work over in career planning and development. How many of you have been to our office ever? I've seen you. Okay, that's
I think
right.
I might have came for a mirror interview.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes, we did visit with you now. Remember that dilemma. So our office is now part of what they call the Compass Center because Drury has decided and figured out that there's a really important intersection between what you're going to do when you graduate and what you're doing here academically. So we're working a lot more closely with academic advising to kind of make sure that you find the best route possible moving forward. What our office specifically focuses on, though, is kind of more the career connection to what you're doing academically. So we work with students on a variety of things. There's really two sides to the career development coin. There's the exploration piece, which it sounds like some of you are still there. You might have figured out what you want to major in, but what do you want to do with that major? And where do you want to go from here? And I know that can be a terrifying thought. You might want to have a plan B as much as I'm sure you're going to make your plan A. Everybody should have a plan B. Vet school, you should have a plan B. So kind of starting to figure out what you might want to do when you graduate is an important thing to think about now because there are experiences that you can create for yourself that will set you up and help you figure out what that might be. Just to give you a little background, I was an English major who had no idea what I was going to do when I graduated and walked out the door, and the door kind of hit me in the tail, and I was like, ooh, now what? Big wide world out here. So I know where you are when you're feeling a little bit anxious about maybe what the next step is. You aren't exactly sure. But there are people here to help you, and our office works very hard to do that. We also work on the more what people typically associate with career planning, and that's the job search assistance. And so we work with everything from helping with internships. We help somewhat with research applications. Not as much with that. You'll probably go more to your faculty members for that information, but we do have some information on opportunities. And then also just on finding internships and full-time positions, even part-time jobs while you're here in school. So part of what we're going to talk about today is that second piece, not the exploration piece, which I think I'm going to come back later in the semester and talk to you a little bit more about how you can go about really discovering what it is you want to do next and how to get there. But today we're going to talk a little bit more about just the job search piece and also kind of maybe even grad school application piece. But resumes are going to be an integral part of that process. And they are not the most exciting thing in the world unless you're someone like me who absolutely loves them and find them just really interesting to write and create and discover in people. But really they are a critical piece. They're going to help you figure out who you are. It's a great way to see a snapshot of what you've accomplished so far and so where you might go from there based on what's on your resume. So for example, Delilah, when you were talking about having, doing that current job that you have at the nursing home and how that's helping you, that would be a great piece to kind of say, whoa, I've done this, I liked this about it, where can I take that, where can I go next using that? So resumes are a great place for you to kind of stop and take stock of who you are, what you've done so far, and what your next step is. They also are required for a job. So how many of you think you might do an internship between now and when you graduate? Okay. And how many of you think you might do a research experience? Okay. So you'll probably, there are different kinds of resumes. First of all, if you're going for a job or an internship, you will do what's considered a conventional resume, which is going to be a one-page document. If you are, however, going to apply to grad school or perhaps for a research experience, you might do more of what they call a CV, which is going to be the basic differences. You can do multiple pages on a CV, and you're going to include a lot of things that you've done here project-wise academically. It's a little bit more academic focused. At this point in your lives, though, you can't get too excited about it because most of you don't have too much experience in either area. So you pretty much get on that document what you can. And so I'm going to talk to you about ways to organize that. But there's also another important thing you need to understand about resumes is what is their purpose? So what do you guys think? What in terms of the job search process, what's the function of the resume? Anybody have an idea? Yeah.
To showcase your experience.
Yes, exactly. It showcases your experience. What is the purpose? What is your goal when you're writing a resume? What do you hope to accomplish with it?
You don't really have an objective, like basing resumes off of the specific thing that you're applying for, and you kind of just wanna like portray your best self.
Right? And you're doing both of those things because your ultimate goal when you're writing this resume is to get
Their attention.
their attention for the
Job.
Huh?
For the job.
job, but coming before the job, you have to get in and get to the interview. And this is an important distinction because some people write their resumes thinking it's going to get them the job, and it's not. It's going to get you the interview. The interview gets you the job. So that being said, you need to think about what you want to include on the resume. You want to include the information that's needed to get you in the door so you can have an interview, and then you fill in all the blanks. So I say that because I get people that come in sometimes and they have like these multiple page resumes. And it's like, no, well, that's way too much information for the employer at this point. They really just need to know enough about you to say, okay, we're going to bring you in for the interview. Now, again, for grad schools, it's going to be a little different. And so I'm going to speak mostly about jobs today, but if you have questions about grad school CVs, we can talk about that too. So that being said, none of you are here are English majors like myself, but one thing that you will remember, if you remember from your English classes, when you're writing something, who is more important, you or the audience? The audience. It's always about the audience, unless you're writing yourself a note, in which case you were the audience. But it's always about the audience, and something that people forget to think about when they're writing a resume is that this is really not about you. This is about the audience. This is about the employer. So there are three things they're going to get before they decide to bring you in for an interview. They're going to get the resume, they're going to get a cover letter, and they're going to get an application. Now, these are very different documents. They are not the same thing. Do not think that your cover letter is your resume in paragraph form. That's a big mistake people often make. Don't think your application is just your resume in boxes. They are three different documents that have three different functions. So the application is going to be a legal document, and you have to give them the information they ask for. So they want to know your last 5 jobs. You got to write down your last 5 jobs. They want to know the jobs you've had in the last 25 years. You got to go back before you were born. But now a resume is different. A resume is going to be the information that you want them to have about you. They may not even ask for that on the application. They may not say anything about internships on your application. And maybe you did an unpaid internship, so it doesn't really count as a job. So you want to make sure you get that on your resume. They may not ask about research experience. You've done that, you want to get that on your resume. So your resume is what you want to tell them. The job application is what they need to know. That's a legal document. They're going to use that. They can use that literally to fire you in the future if for some reason they find out you lied on it. That being said, don't lie on your resume either. But the application is a legal document. And then your cover letter has a slightly different purpose. Your cover letter is to introduce you and kind of fill in those blanks that are not on a resume. A resume is going to be what you've done in the past. The cover letter is kind of more your story. This is where you get a chance to say, very briefly, this is what I've done so far, but this is what I want to do. This is where I'm going. This is how I can help you. It's kind of connecting the dots for them a little bit. But cover letters can be a really effective tool when you're applying for jobs, but if they're done poorly, they can just kind of be stuff that they get rid of. So what I'm going to do is give you a couple of resumes. Typically employers now, depending on what you're applying to, will spend, now they throw out all kinds of numbers, but if you're going for a very competitive position where they have hundreds of applications, they will spend literally 6 to 10 seconds on your resume when they initially look at it. And if they don't find anything there that makes it go in the maybe pile, it'll go in the trash. So your resume needs to capture their attention immediately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 resumes, and I'm going to give you 6 seconds to look at each one. And then when you're done, I'm going to ask you which person would you bring in for the interview. You can only bring in one, okay? We're going to say that the job is something, I didn't really think through exactly what kind of a job it would be. Let's say it's an internship working for the Environmental Protection Agency. Look at you. Do they have local affiliates here
Not during this.
in Missouri?
They're not during this.
No, they've all been wiped out.
Climate.
Okay. I know the Missouri Department of
Conservation.
Resources
Yes,
or conservation.
No, conservation.
Conservation.
But that's
Okay.
not EPA, that's a total different
Right.
company.
Right.
I mean, not
So-
a governmental organization, but that exists and is doing a great job.
And they're still doing. Okay, so we'll go to that. Missouri Department of Conservation, and you'll be doing some field work with them. Okay, so that's what this job would be for. This internship would be for. So don't look at these yet. I'm going to pass them around. I'll tell you when to turn them over because you get only 6 seconds. You're welcome. And yes, you are. Okay, that's interesting. And do you know why you remember that name?
Well, I don't know if they're the same people, but I've noticed like they do the same like experiences. So I don't know. But I didn't see the first person's name, so.
Okay.
Alright, Chelsea Smith is bold at the top, whereas the Maryland one here is just kind of off to
Just
the
not as
side.
noticeable. How many of you, if you could bring just one of these two candidates in, because you are a very busy person, how many of you would bring in Marilyn Mills, the first person? You would. Okay. And how many of you would bring in Chelsea, the second one? And you wouldn't bring in either one.
It's good to be different.
I don't like either one. Well, I'm kind of curious. What about Maryland's? So we can tear them back over and take a look at it.
I feel like I had more time to look at this.
Okay.
That's why.
I may not have counted right.
Yeah, I didn't even get to the bottom half of the other one.
Of Chelsea's. Okay, so you got to see more of what Maryland had to offer.
Yeah.
Okay. Those of you that think Chelsea should come in, why? What did you see? What about her resume made you think she should come in?
They all did kind of the same stuff, but Chelsea, some things that she had that the other one didn't was like studying abroad and like being on the event staff for like stuff around town, and it was a lifeguard, and it seems like there's more like more diverse.
The way that it was organized is also better.
Say again.
The way that it was organized is better, like the things that she put like under each, I guess, like title
Section heading?
were
Mhm.
in like the correct, I don't know, I guess it was just like the bold lets you exactly what you were wanting and then you could like go to it, when the other one was just like all the same font, all the same, I don't know, there was just too
Mhm.
much on the other one.
Which is a really important consideration, believe it or not, because how many of you have ever been involved in any hiring and had to read through a bunch of resumes? It can be exhausting.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's really exhausting. And when you have a resume that's hard to read, it makes you start to dislike this candidate when you've read 50 resumes and you're like, it's 3:30 in the afternoon and you're getting a little bit low blood sugar and you're thinking, really, could you not have made this easier for me to read? So actually, that's a really important point to make. What else did you like about Chelsea's? She had a little bit more of a variety of experiences with the study abroad. Yeah, Delilah.
Hers was organized chronologically. It starts most recent and goes to least recent. This one I noticed immediately it was kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
With 2017 being at the top and 2019, and it was just all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like the information was organized based on relevance. Like it doesn't really matter that she was a lifeguard as much as it matters that she, took these classes or was a lab assistant.
Exactly. That's a really important piece to do when you're writing a resume, is to make sure that you arrange your sections in terms of what's most relevant to that job, which is why here's the bad news. Really, if you want to get a job and when you graduate and you're applying for these permanent positions that are pretty competitive, you're going to want to modify your resume for each position. Now, if you're going for 3 different PT positions, typically that's going to be pretty similar. But if you're going for 3 different positions that just need biology as a background, you may want to modify your resume to highlight different accomplishments that you've had based on what the job is asking for. So yeah, in this case, the relevant parts. If you're going to be applying for research or an internship, typically you want to put your education first. Because at this point, that's what employers and schools are looking for, is where are you now in your knowledge? Because we know you don't have much experience, but you do have knowledge. Okay? What about anything else about Chelsea that you want to say offhand?
tried the LinkedIn link, that's kind of neat, the other one didn't. I noticed
Yes.
that.
Yes, and that brings up another good point, Delilah, that I wanted to mention. Your resume is kind of your foundational piece, at least when I work with people, I like to use that way. And you can look at your resume as a place to start to then jump off to promote yourself through other avenues, one of those being LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, I could do a whole presentation on that, but it's a great way for you to connect with people, to network, to find out about jobs, to find out about what people need to do to get to a job. You want to work for National Geographic, okay, then get on LinkedIn and look at the people who work there and what jobs have they held and how did they get to those positions. Has a lot of uses. You can job search with it. But your LinkedIn account is also a really good way for you to connect with people. And like I said, there's lots of uses for it. I highly recommend everybody have a LinkedIn account, and I can work with you if you want to create one. The other thing I want to mention at the very start is there are 2 resumes you really should have at this point. You should be creating a master resume. And a master resume is basically just that. It's everything you've ever done. You can go back to high school at this point. Then once you start submitting resumes for either grad school applications, research internships, whatever, then you can draw from that master resume. But it's really nice if you have all the information in one place and you put it there while you're doing it, while you're in this job at the nursing home, what you're doing there. Because I can promise in 5 years, you'll go, oh, I don't know, I just helped people there, and you forget all the specifics that you've done. So keeping a master resume is a really good thing. One of the hardest things to do when you're writing a resume is to write one for a course. Sorry. Because resumes really need to have a purpose to be effective. So what you'll probably be doing when you're creating this resume is I would suggest you do one of 2 things. You think about what your next use is going to be. If you think you're going to do an internship, create it with an internship in mind. If you think you're going to do research, create it that way. If you really don't know what you're going to use it for next, then create kind of a mini master resume to hand in so that you've got to start there. Did you have a question?
Yeah, how do you organize a master resume? Do you go by year? Like, how do you?
Good question. So I would say when you're creating your resume, you want to think about sections that apply to your life. You're always going to have an education section. That's one section that's standard in every resume and CV. And within each section, you want to do them in reverse chronological order. And that was something that I kind of tried to point out in this poor resume versus the good resume. The good resume, you want to start with your most recent experiences and go backwards from there. But then think about your life. What are your experiences? Because that's going to determine what your section headings are. So, say at this point, you've got work experience, you've got education, you might have some community service, you might have some campus involvement, but you haven't been to a conference yet, and you haven't done a presentation, or you haven't done research, so that's fine. So far, you don't have that. But as soon as you do that, then you add another section, and you include that experience in it. Any experience that you think is going to impact your career in the future, that could be you go to, you do additional training. You go to a leadership training class in the summer through, your church camp. You do a mission trip. That could be on your resume too. One of the things people often forget about is all of the community service they've done. Drury really promotes community service. And so that should be on your resume because that really is going to show that you have a different skill set and also that you've got kind of some interests outside of just self-promotion. So I think community service is an important thing to include. Depending on the organization you go to work for, they might really value someone who comes in with that kind of service too. Did that answer that at all? A little bit. And it's really a matter of, oftentimes I just sit down with people and I start interviewing them, and then you tell me what you've been doing, and then you can kind of lay out what kinds of experiences you would have. But traditionally for you guys at this point, education, work history, any kind of work experience, research or internships that you've done, community service, campus involvement. Those are the main ones. And then you can rearrange those depending on if you have too many experiences in one area and you want to break it up. Okay? All right, so let me see what else I want to say to you about all this. Okay. So another thing that I would say, and I'm going to try to, can I sit down? Because see, that makes it more what I said it was gonna be. I said we were gonna do a round table, and here I am standing up.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm gonna sit down, but you may wanna move your camera. So one of the things that I would say you need to think about when you're writing a resume, in fact, in the entire application process, again, whether it's grad school or whether it's a job, is you wanna think about three things. Who are they looking for? Who is it they want? The second thing is, who are you? What have you got to offer? What are your experiences? And then the third thing is, make that connection for them. Too many people look at resumes and really the whole application process as, this is all about me. I'm just gonna write down everything I've ever done. This is a mini biography of who I am and what I have to offer, without really realizing what you need to do is make that connection to them and what it is they're doing. So say you're going for grad school, and you're going into a program that really, say it's a PT school, and it really emphasizes, say, sports medicine and sports PT, athletic training and that kind of thing. Then what I would do in my resume is, if you happen to be a college athlete, I would get that up top, front and center, because that's gonna be more important. You're going into a program where maybe it's much more clinically based, medically based. Then maybe the fact that you're an athlete is still important, but not as important. So you really want to help make those connections to them about who they're looking for and who you are. So that's the primary thing. So the first thing you do when you're writing a resume or you're going to submit one is look at the job description. You would be surprised how many people don't read the job description. Yeah, I looked at it. Did you bring it with you? Do you have it? What was in it? Oh, I don't know. It was an internship. I just need an internship, Read the job description carefully, and what I tell people to do is to literally go through that job description and highlight everything in it that you have done. So if they're asking for someone who can do documentation or reporting in the lab, some kind of lab documentation, I'm getting over my head here, then make sure that you get that information in your resume as close to the top, okay, as you can. So if you have to rearrange your sections, because that information is in a different section that's now down at the bottom, then do so. So reading that job description, and what you want to do too, I'll even tell people, sometimes the hardest thing about writing a resume is coming up with the terminology. It's like, how do I describe what I did? Well, look at that job description. You can use some of those phrases from the job description, because then they're going to recognize them. And they're going to say, oh yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for. And you've got that phrase in your description of what you did at this experience. So using the industry terminology and using keywords is really important, because that's going to be recognizable to the employer. They've been looking at that job description, they created it, they know who they're looking for, now they're going to see those things mirrored in your resume. So that's why I'm saying that ideally, if you really want a job, you want to modify that resume to be as specific to that position as you can. And I don't know why you would apply for a job you don't want. But people do it all the time. And they'll come in the office and say, I sent in 50 applications and I haven't heard back once. And I'm like, oh, no wonder. I can't imagine what you're sending in if you have the time to send in 50 applications. How do you have the time to do that? So it's much more important to take the time to, number one, see that the job is a good fit for you. And don't underestimate your abilities. Like if they want 3 years experience and you've got 2.5, apply for it. If they want 5 years experience and you're starting out, don't apply for it. So there is some wiggle room there. But know the job and then take the time to really make your documents and your materials specific to them and do 100% on it. That's the best way to get a job or an internship or a into graduate school, honestly. Okay, so you know the job, you've read the job, you've looked for key skills, and industry terminology that you want to include in it. And then another thing to think about is describing your experiences in ways that translate to that particular job. So, okay, we're talking about this internship with the Department of Conservation. Who has a work experience here that they don't think relates to a position that you might have at the Department of Conservation? What do you think?
I'm a server.
You're a server, okay. So what you want to do is think about what skills have you developed as a server, that might be transferable to a position working for the Department of Conservation, say doing field work and data collection and field samples. Anything
Had to
about-
work well with others.
Okay, exactly. Okay, so you're going to want to stress the teamwork that you've done. That's going to be really important. What else? Food service is such a typical job for people, and they just think, okay, I'm just going to write down I was a server. What else might you focus on?
Work well under pressure.
Under pressure, yes. Multitasking, you know, oh my gosh.
It's fast paced.
Very fast paced. The memory, I mean, sometimes you have these people that come up to the table, there's 10 of you at the table, and they just say, what do you want, what do you want, what do you want? And they walk away, and I'm like, huh? Where is your pad and paper? So yeah, those kinds of skills that you can stress. So you will want to look at what you've done in those jobs and ask yourself, how does this prepare me for my next step? And so that's what you want to highlight. If you would be working, say, for the Department of Conservation at one of the museums at Wilson's Creek Battlefield, and you're going to be working with the public, okay, then you really want to stress your customer service skills in that job. Not so much the food part, but the customer service skills. And maybe you worked at a restaurant where they've got one of those ridiculously long menus, and you have to basically memorize the whole thing. Well, that would be a helpful thing to know, because if you're going to be a docent at the museum, you've got to remember all these facts and information. So you could stress that aspect, that you memorized a menu with 145 items on it. I would be impressed with that. So you want to think in terms of what you've done and how that relates. Another way to look at experiences is look at what you've accomplished there. Are you the person that never missed one day of work? Put that down. Are you the person that regularly filled in for people who did? Put that down. Did you get recognized? Were you Employee of the Month at McDonald's? I hear people say so often, oh, I just worked at McDonald's. Okay, I don't know how the rest of the world is, but I'm like, if you can work at McDonald's and not lose your mind with the way people are these days, kudos to you. There's a McDonald's I go to, okay, guilty thing, I do go to McDonald's, bad person. I also drink kombucha. But anyway, and I'm always impressed that when I go through that drive-through window, those people are just as pleasant and happy and cheerful, and I'm like, wow. That's really impressive. I mean, I always think if I'm going to hire somebody, I think I'm going to go to that one McDonald's and hire those people right out of that window. So don't underestimate how important that can be. You get Employee of the Month. That's impressive. That speaks to your work ethic. Any kind of a job is going to speak to your work ethic. Okay. So that's important. Okay. Questions so far? Yes.
So, would you recommend, doing bullet point, whenever you're talking about just work experience or just any of your experiences, would you recommend to do, bullet point, I guess, just simple, short, and sweet, or, just, literally just, a word to describe it, each thing?
That's an excellent question. And it's also a very magical tight wire. Never just a word. However, there are some pretty important things you want to keep in mind when you're describing your experiences. How quickly can they scan your resume? So say, for example, if you look at Maryland's, one thing you never do when you're describing an experience on a resume, you never use pronouns. Well, not first person. You never use first person pronouns. So there's no I's in a resume. If you have a summary section or a profile section, you can use it there. But typically, I tell people just even avoid it there. Keep it very, very professional. You write in fragments. That's one thing. The second thing that's important is that action verb that you're going to start your bullet point with. So if you look at Chelsea's, assist, handle, assumed, performed, generated worksheets. This is a real important word, because that tells me right away what you can do. You can generate worksheets. You've performed these things. The verb is really important. Mm-hmm.
And then also, I noticed on Chelsea's, I don't know, not the other one, but how she says under study abroad assisted, and then under related experience assist. So do you recommend sticking with past tense or?
Good question. So she says assisted under study abroad because that's in the past. She completed that experience. But the lab assistant position, she is still there. So that's why that one is in present tense, and that's something that messes people up a lot. So if you're currently in that position, you speak about it in present tense. As soon as it's done, then you speak about everything you did there in past tense. Okay, good catch. Describing things, one thing you want to do is, as much as possible, quantify and qualify what you say. So if you can use numbers, and again, going back to that specific industry terminology, something people, is a common mistake people make when they write resumes. They speak in generalities because they feel like, well, I don't want to get too specific. That's going to, this is an HR person. They're not going to understand, whatever it is you guys do. So always, though, be specific. Use those specific terminology. If you were a camp counselor for the summer and you were working with special needs kids and there were 25 kids in your particular cabin and you were the sole counselor, then, say all those things. That gives me a much better picture than just saying camp counselor worked at a camp for the summer. The other thing it does when you think about it is, if you give that kind of a description, it paints a picture in the mind of the person who's reading the resume. How am I doing on time? So, do you need time at the end?
No,
Okay.
absolutely.
So it paints a picture, and that's what they're going to remember. They're going to remember an image, a concrete image, better than they will an abstraction. So if you just say, did documentation, that doesn't really tell me much. But if you say, entered field study data on 12 species into Excel spreadsheets for use in, by agency, that's going to give me a much better idea of what you can do, and also it'll stick in my mind. So that's a good question. You want to balance that with not too much. You don't want to have so much text on the resume that people look at it and go, I'll put this one aside and look at it next. But you want to have enough to get their interest and make them want to bring you in for that interview.
My suggestion would be, as you just said, short, concise, and to the point, and keywords, just as Lisa mentioned, right? So you either use their words or something that it's gonna capture.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just repeating what you said,
Right.
but in general, especially for science type resumes, would be short, concise, and to the point. No narrative, no narration. In fact, to the disappointment or ink of English professors and majors, I don't think you always need verbs. When you do need the verb, use the verb, and then think there are lots of really cool lists. You can find now lists of verbs that express what you want to express, powerful verbs. But whenever you don't need the verb, that's totally fine too, in my book, because again, short, concise, and to the point.
And going back to what you'd asked earlier, that just reminded me of something. Another section that's really helpful to have, particularly in the sciences, is a skills section. You don't want to include in your skills section, though, something like detail-oriented or hardworking. Stay away from those cliches. Also, but you do want, because you guys are in a technical field, you've got a lot of technical things you list. So the types of equipment that you've worked on, maybe certain kinds of documentation or research. I mean, your professors can help you with that. You can look through. Sometimes when I'm working with a student, I'll just say, what classes had you taken? And we'll look at the course descriptions. It's like, oh, it says right here you used an electron microscope. Did you use it? Do you feel fairly comfortable with it? Okay, let's put that down under a skill. So there's actually, on the Drury website, if you look up job search guide, okay, just search job search guide. We have a guide in here that's on everything to prepare for a job or an internship or maybe a graduate application. But there's on page 19 and 20, there's information on resumes and what to include in a resume and different kinds of headings you might use. But at the end, there's like 10 pages of sample resumes. And one of them on page 34 is actually a biology chemistry sample resume. And this was actually a student that graduated from here and made some changes a little bit. But for the most part, this is who this person was when they graduated. But there's all kinds of things you can do with summary sections. This is all, resumes really are specific and custom to you. So this is one reason you don't want to use a template. They'll get you in trouble. Just use a blank Word document when you're creating your resume. But this person researched genetic research, policy development. That was the goal of this person. And then, so some of the things she'd worked on: PCR analysis, I don't even know what this is, multi-step synthesis, separation, purification, genomic research. These are things she had done in her experience. So those are very specific technical skills right up here front and center. And then for this particular resume, and this is helpful once you've had a little bit more experience, it's a little harder right at this point in your lives, some accomplishments that she can point to that right away catch the reader's eye and make them want to read the rest of the resume. But yeah, skills section, I should have put that on Chelsea's. Would be a good thing for you all to have on your resumes as well. I put the, some of the things that are on here too will come off as you get more experience. If you get to the point where you've got like 3 research experiences and an internship and there's no room for your work history, at the bottom you can put the work history just specifically just to show you've worked with no bullets, no descriptions whatsoever. So just start eliminating the things that aren't as important. Work history is important though, because it shows you can hold a job. And that's important to employers. They like to know that you've held a job, even if it's working at McDonald's.
Do you not recommend having like an objective, or is that like outdated now?
You know, that's a good question. Typically, depends on what you're using the resume for. If you're going to a career fair and you're going to be handing out your resume to a lot of people, which by the way, we have a career fair February 26th, Wednesday. I think that's the 26th. There will be, the Department of Conservation will be there, lots of people, lots of internships are there. There's also lots of schools. It is on our website if you search career planning, but I believe it's from, because it just came through yesterday, and I think they changed the time a little bit, 11 to 3, maybe, or 11:30 to 3. It was noon to 3. Yeah, it's like 11:30 to 3. If you can come over, I highly recommend you do. There's like 170 employers. Look, if you do decide to come, look at the list before you come and decide who you want to visit with, because otherwise you'll walk in and waste your time. But there are a lot of agencies there, government agencies, that are
Actually,
science related.
This is fantastic. How about if it's on a Wednesday
Mhm.
and it covers this time slot? How about we meet for class there, and it's not a class? How about the challenge to you? It's about a month, or 2 days, less, but you have a month to actually produce a resume to take there and take it for a ride. Just for the fun of it, just to see what people are how are they gonna react to your resume. So brilliant.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. We'll put it on Moodle or emails, or somehow you'll get the information.
I can
And instead
send
of
it to you.
class that day, you're coming to the fair. And remember that everything is on you for this class. Basically, my joke is that you get everything out of something as much effort you put in it. So if for any really good reason you cannot make it, talk to someone that actually could make it. Do you follow where I'm going with this? And
A
since
lot
I-
of grad schools there too, so if you're
Absolutely.
interested in
And
grad
even
schools,
if
you
it's
can
not
make a
something
connection.
that you really want, you're so set on what you're doing and you don't need the fair, it's still the time in your life to go to this kind of fair. Even if you don't need it today or this year because you're still going to be too busy in school and you're already going to be poached to play basketball or something like that, it's still the time in your life to go. If I go, I wouldn't get the same experience that you go, right? So.
And I learn something every year. It's like, oh,
Absolutely.
really? You have that kind of a job? This company has that kind of a job? You don't have any idea what you can do with your major until you get out there and start talking to people about what you can do with it. So it's a great place to explore possible paths, and also to kind of start to get some idea from employers about, so what is it you're looking for in people when you look at your applicants? It's a great question. You can't ask that when you're going in for a job. So this is the time to kind of do some of that background research. When you come, we do ask that you dress appropriately professionally. So no jeans, slacks, and a nice top of some sort, a button-down shirt or something for you guys is what you should be appearing in.
Lisa, is this all on your website?
It's all on our website.
I'll
and
make sure they get a link to it.
Okay, and I will send it to you when I get back, so that it's in an email and easy for you to find. And it's a great place for you to practice kind of that networking type stuff too, and asking for information. And then, like I said, trying. So back to your question, for a career fair, yeah, you could put some kind of a summary statement. I would avoid the word objective. That's become a little bit outdated itself. People will tell you that objectives are outdated, but that's mainly because people write bad ones. Also, So, getting back to that, I would use it more as a summary statement about who you are and what you want to do. So say, for example, again, in this job search guide, there's one on page 35. This is specific and would be good for going to a career fair. A junior computer science student seeks part-time software development internship in Springfield, Missouri. 2 previous internships, advanced coursework, strong interpersonal and leadership skills, and then it's got a list of their skills, their computer skills. So, you know, when it's specific, that's the thing with a objective or a summary statement. You want it to be specific, not general, and it's about the employer. Again, it's not about you. Looking for a position where I can grow my talents and go up, you know, rise up the corporate ladder. Literally, I've had people come in with objectives similar to that. And you got to put yourself in the shoes of the employer. It's like, okay, great, yeah, I'm not here for you. You're here for me. That's how they look at it. I'm sorry, but that's how they look at it. So remember, it's a sales pitch. So tell them what they need to know about you, and that would depend. But if you're going for a specific position, sometimes you want a summary statement. If you have a whole lot of things you're going to emphasize, you can put a summary statement at the top. Athletics, if anybody in here in athletics, I don't mean to assume it's just the guys, I don't know why. Okay, 3 of you. Okay, so athletics, college athletics, you definitely want a section on that. Very important to include in your resume. And sometimes something to highlight in your summary statement, particularly if you've kept a high GPA, because most people understand that college athletics are very demanding. And so if you've done that, plus you've done an internship, plus you've kept a high GPA, I can help you come up with what your story is. That's the biggest thing. Figuring out what your story is will help you figure out what your next step is, and it'll also help you get there. So
We have only 1/2 a minute left, but I'm gonna jump in about the objective, and Lisa's here to correct me instead of waiting for next week if it's not true. But the way I see the need for objective is if you have one general resume that you're using at a career fair, that you're throwing it like your business card to a whole bunch of different employers, hoping that one of them will land. So in that situation, you do need to show them what exactly you want from yourself to do, to become, to whatever. But usually, you're gonna apply to a specific job or internship, so that means that you don't need to explain your objective, because they already have their own objective for the future candidate. So you're gonna shape yourself on paper according to what they're looking for.
right.
Does that make a
I
little
think
bit
that's a
more
good.
sense? So-
And the only reason I would say sometimes you do have a summary statement is if, like I said, you've got 3 or 4 major things you want to be sure they know about you, and you're tying them together. That summary statement can be effective. It's like but it's not necessary. Sometimes too, I use it because there's not, you can't fill up a page. Okay, let's come up with a good summary statement to kind of fill up some space because you don't have enough experiences yet. There's all different ways to do it. Yeah.
Would that go at the top, like where the objective is?
Yes, good question. There's only, yes, the summary statement or objective or profile always goes first. And even if it's an objective, don't call it that. You can put it up there without calling it anything. And just put it between lines. You can see in some of these sample resumes different ways to go about doing that. And once you guys get your resumes pulled together, if you want to make an appointment and come in and have me take a look at it real quick, I'd be happy to do that. So anyway. Any other
Thank you so
questions?
much, Lisa.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure. It was enjoyable visiting with you guys.